Joining me in the studio now to look at the impact of the war on the Middle East is Tarek Cherkaoui. He is the manager of the TRT World Research Center. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
When we think of World War I, usually we think of those black and white images of the soldiers trapped in trenches or the massive loss of life along the Western Front. But World War I had a huge impact on the region that we know today as the Middle East. Do you think that the many conflicts that we see today in the Middle East, such as the Palestine-Israeli conflict and the war in Syria, do you think that has roots in World War I?
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely spot on to highlight this aspect of the World War I. I think for me personally, World War I never stopped in the Middle East. What we are witnessing, what we are seeing on the ground is just a continuation of a long time grievances and long time the dynamics and interactions that are still taking place today. Just to give you, some ideas about this aspect, I think the Sykes-Picot Agreement was a disaster of epic proportions. It has just randomly put lines in the sand, and by this token, it has shattered a system that existed for centuries. The Ottoman system allowed ethnicities, allowed different ethnic groups and religions and sects to cohabit together and live side by side. What this agreement has done is it has just shattered the whole system without bringing anything to the table that allows this cohabitation to continue. Mm-hmm. So everything that stemmed from that was a train wreck, basically. From that you have like a reservoir of resentment, of anger, and there were ideologies that also took advantage of that and tapped into that reservoir. Like if you say the ideology, for example, of Nasser, Pan-Arabism or Ba'ath regime until today in Syria, and before that in Iraq, everything was part of this dynamic because they claim that they're gonna peg back the Sykes-Picot Agreement to square one, which of course didn't happen, but the effects are still unfolding. And then there's something more to the story, is also the Balfour Declaration, which came a year or 2 years after the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And by creating Israel in the region, it has also added fuel to the fire.
Right, so the Sykes-Picot Agreement, it carved up the region with no regard to the diversity in religion and ethnicity. And some people believe that the British and the French did this on purpose to create chaos with the intent of taking control. Do you believe that? And what more can you say about the role that the Arabs played in that?
I think, of course you can have both sides to the argument. In my view, I think these are two aristocrats. One is French, the other is Brit. They met together. They just, find it fun to draw maps on the lines on the map and carve that out. However, the French have a different way of doing because they insisted on this sectarian. For example, if you see their experiment in Lebanon and Syria, definitely there was an intentional aspect of it because the system they built is 100% sectarian. It's built on, like if you see today, Lebanon, it's a dysfunctional state. Why? Because everything has to go through sectarian lines. Everything is divided along sectarian lines, which is not exactly aligned with what the 20th century even was about. It was about nationalism, it was about nation state, but in this case it was about sectarianism. So for the French side, I believe there was some intention into that. From the British side, I think it was more like the continuation of imperial politics.
Mm-hmm. All right, Tarek Cherkaoui, thank you so much for joining us today and shedding some light on the role that World War I perhaps played in the Middle East. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.